Invite now Jen Jackson, VP of Sales at iModerate, and Kristen McLane, Manager and Market and Consumer Insights at Abbott Nutrition. They're going to talk to us about how Abbott infused insights into a condensed go-to-market push. And they told me these things. Jen is iModerate's reigning Iron Chef's champion. So well done to Jen. And Kristen told me she was a member of the Muskingum University Athletic Hall of Fame for playing, can you guess which sport? Volleyball. So, floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, it's no Hall of Fame, but you can just take my word that the iModerate Iron Chef competition is a big deal. So I just want to start by having everybody just quickly stand up for a second. So it just takes a second. Stretch, take in a deep breath. Let's get to our presentation. Give your neighbor a high five. So we learned yesterday at one of the keynote speakers that at 5 o'clock is the time when parole boards are least likely to give a positive review. So not that Kristen and I are inmates, but we want everybody to have a good session. So that's all. Feel free to sit down. Okay, so I'm going to start. My name's Jen. I'm with iModerate, and this is Kristen. She's with Abbott Nutrition, and we're here to talk about how Abbott maintained an insightful consumer insight strategy during a very aggressive go-to-market push for a new infant formula. So Kristen's going to start us off by talking about the role of research at Abbott, the typical product launch life cycle. We'll talk about this specific product and some of the unique needs and research that we did, and then ultimately how those insights impacted success.
Thanks, Jen. So just a little bit before we get started, for those of you who may not be as familiar with Abbott, Abbott is a 125-year young company, a global healthcare company with 75,000 Abbott peeps across the world in 150 countries, and with the global mission of advancing health across the world. Abbott Nutrition, which is the division that I am in, is one of 4 roughly sized divisions. My sister divisions are established pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and diagnostics. And at Abbott Nutrition, we have the sole purpose of being the innovative leader in science-based nutrition to make all life stages the healthiest they can be, from infancy to elderly. So we're behind some of the most trusted brands in pediatric, adult, and performance nutrition. Hopefully many of you have used some of them, such as Similac, Pedialyte, Ensure, or IIeX for those sports performance folks that may be out there. And so that's a little bit about Abbott, in case you're not familiar.
And just real quickly about iModerate, we're a consumer insights firm, and we help our clients become fluent in the ways of their audiences through a deeper understanding of their motivations, needs, and language. We've been helping our clients connect with their consumers to truly understand them inside and out through a unique blend of one-on-one conversation and text analytics. And we actually started working with Kristen by helping them fill in the gaps in some of their current research needs. Kristen called us with a need to talk with moms very quickly, whether that's for a product launch like we're going to talk about today, or for a label redesign. There are often questions that need moms' input, but sometimes not time to get it. So Kristen and Abbott are one of our subscription clients, and for them that means that we have a dedicated project team that not only gets to know Kristen and her team and their needs, but also gets to know the key audience, so that when Kristen does call and says, I really need to talk to moms today, we can move with an army of insight and knowledge behind us. We've done 40+ jobs for Abbott, and many of them on the specific launch that we'll talk about.
That's right. So just a little bit more about Abbott's innovation process. It's a 5-step stage gate process, which I think a lot of folks are familiar with, which does provide this robust framework all the way from idea to product launch. And you know, depending on the complexity of the product and the needs, this can take anywhere from 6 months to several years. And this complexity can be driven by several factors. The number of products or SKUs that are impacted, the number of markets that we're trying to launch into, and the product reformulation needs that may be necessary. Consumer and market insights, consumer research plays a vital role across this entire process as one of the key cross-functional stakeholders throughout the journey. You know, coming in all the way from idea to where we need to go figure out that deep consumer insight, that unmet need, turn it into something tangible that we can assess and evaluate with consumers or customers. Depending on that evaluation, either go back to the drawing board or keep flowing through the process as we develop it into actual launch and in market. As a point of reference, in 2014, Abbott did launch 65 new products globally. So my counterparts and I were pretty busy. And we go next. So now we're going to talk about how this process came to life through a project that Jenn and I worked on. And we can really illustrate how our partnership with iModerate allowed us to do this very successfully. But first, a little bit of background, just to kind of understand the context we were dealing with. So in 2012, there were a lot of categorical dynamics at play in the infant formula market that were causing infant formula manufacturers to think very differently about their business and necessitated the need to know their consumer better than ever. So breastfeeding rates had continued to increase as they had been over several years. Birth rates in the US were flat to declining ever since the recession of 2007 that was leading to economic uncertainty that was causing folks to marry later, what we saw on day one, that marry later trend definitely was impacting our business. Having babies later and actually delaying adding to their families as well. So all this was resulting in less babies to be fed. The other thing that we knew was that 70% of moms would supplement with infant formula at some point in the first year, and many of them would transition to exclusive infant formula within the first couple of months as they transitioned back to work. Time constraints didn't allow for it, and quite frankly, just some pain and discomfort through the process. So we had all these different pieces and parts, but what we needed to figure out is how to bring them all together, touch base with the consumer, and ultimately unlock new growth potential. So what resulted was my team, me, having to come up with a way to get through all of this in a very short time frame, accelerated and aggressive. We had about 10 months to get from idea to launch to hit the spring retailer resets to get on market. But needless to say, we couldn't skip anything, really, because it was all important. And we also had the complexity of our business of needing to talk to both moms, who's the end consumer of the product, and healthcare professionals, who are a key influencer of product and brand decision in this market. So tasked with finding creative and efficient ways to get there. In total, I think we did about 10 projects all in all. About half of those actually had iModerate in part of it, which Jenn will talk about in the next slide. The other half were traditional concept testing, communication evaluation, benefit claims testing, et cetera. But what iModerate allowed us to do was really fill in those gaps or augment existing research that we had to really accelerate our decision-making when we didn't have the liberty of traditional timelines.
Perfect. So as Kristen mentioned, we weren't the only research in the mix, but we did help at a few pivotal points that helped Abbott maintain their launch goals. So first there was the idea phase, and Kristen talked about some of the preliminary insights that they had that gave them the nugget of the idea that moms were supplementing in some way, but during this phase they needed to go out and actually understand from moms what were their frustrations around breastfeeding and their need to supplement, and how did that make them feel. So we used iModerate's one-on-one conversations to do in-depth discussions with moms where we explored language around breastfeeding and the need for supplementation. We talked about the idea and reactions to the idea, and overwhelmingly moms agreed that it really was an important product, and that language helped Abbott move into the concept phase. So at that phase, they went and they developed their concepts, and they were about to launch a traditional quantitative test to test the various versions of the concepts against each other, but they knew they also wanted qualitative to help them optimize those concepts. Doing so in a traditional fashion via a quant survey and then a focus group or vice versa, just there wasn't enough time for it. So again, we used our one-on-one conversations, but this time integrated them into the quant survey so that as moms were already going through that survey experience and being exposed to concepts, we could intercept them for an in-depth discussion to probe on that a little bit more, giving Abbott the ability to seamlessly combine context with metrics. At this point, they take all the information that they've learned, all the feedback that they have, and they go into designing the final details of the concept. They come out on the other end of that in the development phase, and as Kristen mentioned, there's a second key stakeholder here, the healthcare professional, who at this point no research had been done with them. And they're a key influencer to mom. They take on the role of being front of the line, being able to recommend, as well as just feeling the burden of wanting to make sure that they're making the best recommendation for mom and baby and really the whole family. So we knew that we needed to do one study and catch up on all of these things in one project. So again, we went out with our one-on-one conversations, but this time starting with the idea, floating it by them and validating the idea, testing the final concept. And at this point, we knew how to talk about the concept with moms, but we didn't know what additional information or scientific support that HCPs would need to feel comfortable ultimately recommending the product. And then in the final launch phase, we did several projects in rapid succession around the final communication that Abbott would be using to promote the product. So claims testing, message and ad testing, package design and label testing, with several key groups from prenatal moms to postnatal moms and, again, HCPs.
Yep. So a lot happened in that time frame, and I quite frankly blocked a lot of it out until Jenn and I started talking about this whole process. But when I went back and I thought about how the process came to life and really what were the game changers and how our relationship really elevated what we were able to do, it enabled us to do these three things. So one, the dual customer voice, which in our category is critical to have both mom and that healthcare professional, because we can't forget one or the other because they're both critical in different ways. So we were able to get both voices into the conversation throughout the process, which allowed for that increased efficiency because we were doing some of these things in parallel or at the same time when typically we would have had to do them sequentially when we didn't have that liberty of time. And ultimately, clear direction. So, I didn't have to sit there and go, well, what should I do? I could ask the people that ultimately would be using the product or recommending the product what we should be doing. So then I knew what changes, what direction we needed to make, and then ultimately how we could delight the end consumer or customer. So what happened? We did make it to April. It did get on market, thanks to a lot of work by my marketing partners as well, and supply chain and all of those other great cross-functionals. We did overachieve plan, grew 10 points of incremental share throughout the process, and have continued to grow EQ since the launch. We also were first to market, which in the infant formula category is critical because it's a dogfight out there every day, quite frankly. And then within a year, both of our competitors did come on the market with a similar type of product as well. So getting out there first is critical. So with that, that was a quick synopsis. So hopefully we've got some time for
Yes,
any
thank you very
questions.
much. No, I'm not Patricio. It's not a transfiguration. My name is Peter Urban. I work with Greenbook and would like to scan the room for questions. Right there, there's one.
Can you explain how you did the qual-quant piece in terms of dipping into selectively, how did they integrate? Did you pick selective people who were interesting or had a specific ranking on a question, and then you did the deep dive?
Yep. Yes, so exactly. So we were doing traditional concept tests, and then we wanted to talk to folks who were concept acceptors and concept rejectors through their quantitative assessment of the concepts, and both competitive and brand users as well. So we also wanted to talk to folks that were Similac users and those that were our competitor and Famil user, and go deeper into why did you like the concept, why didn't you like it, and where could we improve it, and having that tied directly into the quant, and then being able to come out and have your quantitative metrics with that qualitative overlay. I mean, it saved time, but it also just brought that richness to the table.
Was it simultaneous, or you then selected the people?
So it was simultaneous. As Kristen mentioned, there were some parameters in terms of how they had to answer so that they could qualify for the session. So we knew who they wanted to talk to. As those participants are coming through, our moderators are logged on for an interception, and it actually happens inside of the quant survey. So the participant doesn't have to go anywhere else to download anything or be invited to a new experience. It's happening in real time in that survey. So that the conversation to them feels very seamless. I think in addition to talking about just why did you like it or why didn't you like it, it was really important to understand what they took away from the messaging so that Kristen's team could use that for optimization purposes.
There's another one that side of the room, one of the mic runners.
See up here.
Thank you.
Hi, I have two very specific questions. The first one is, within this process, did you actually physically place product to pilot it, test it with moms using it? And the second question is, when you talked about iterative questions to test communications, was that like a panel that you met every 3 days? Was it different people? What was specifically those iterative conversations you had?
Yep, so I can take the first one. The short answer is no. We didn't do any actual product placement or in-home testing. In the infant formula space, it's actually really, really challenging due to all of the regulations and safety and quality concerns to do in-home consumer testing. So if we do actual product testing, we'll do it in a controlled central location or our own sensory testing. But in this case, we did not actually place product. And then on the second one, the iterative communication, it was different people over a couple of different projects, which were happening, I think, over the course of a couple weeks. We did the work because it was, well, if it looks like this in the print ad and we have this kind of copy and this kind of graphics, what would you think? And then it was like, oh, wait, what if we change it, based on that feedback, the layout being different, the actual inclusion of a claim or a benefit statement that may be different before. So it was over a couple of weeks. But again, it was a couple weeks versus 2 months.
And we've actually done it a couple different ways for Abbott on this product launch and other studies that we've done where we've used both methods. Sometimes we find that it is really important to have that new person so they're not necessarily always mentally going back to what they originally saw. And then in other cases where we are working through an iterative process, we've had, for example, threaded discussions where we're talking with respondents for 4 days. And Abbott will use the feedback that they learn on days 1 and 2 to make changes on day 3 and do final testing on 4. So a couple different ways we've done it.
Other questions? So I am no Patricio, but he did leave a question for me to ask from you guys, a very interesting question. But before going there, I just wanted to tell the mic runners that can you please let the organizers know that we'll need 2 more high chairs for the next session. And here's the question. What happens internally at Abbott during the design phase, and how did the research that you have conducted previously inform that step?
Lots of fun around the table discussions. No, that's where if all the cross-functionals come together and it's the supply chain, can we make it, and when can we make it, and how hard is it going to be? It's product development. What's the, okay, we know what the idea is going to be and what the benefit promise of the concept's going to be. R&D, can you make it? And how hard is it going to be? And how much time is it going to take us to get there? What's the supply chain capabilities? Labeling services comes in and tells us timelines. Finance starts to, project all of their financial assumptions and things like that. So all of that stuff up front helps them better do their jobs because they have more of an actual formed opinion versus, hey, we've got this wacky idea. Can we make it happen?
So that's the part that you wanted to block out.
Yes, those are the fun conversations that I have nightmares about. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Let me see. Any other questions from the room?
Going once.
Well, with that, thank you so much. Really, help give a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.